Here we go. We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. All right, shifting gears now. If you have questions or comments, if you live in Davidson County, you can expect to see a property tax increase like we've talked about in the past, 34% property tax increase. After a very lengthy meeting, I misspoke. The guest joining us now, who is Vice Mayor Jim Shulman, has sat through them all, a little bit tired, and I really thank him for joining us this morning after staying up all night. But I said this was the longest city council meeting last night. You said not the case, Nick. There was one longer.
Well, thank you for having me, Nick.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, we had one until 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
This one ended at 4:30 in the morning, and I thought about just coming on over here. I thought I'm just not going to go home. I'll just wear what I got and I'll just show up. But
right.
We made it through, and we did pass a budget last night. All
right. So this a lot of discussion, and we know there were options. It was not the mayor's budget. It was the one from Councilman Mendez. It does call for a 34% property tax increase. As you know, there were plenty of people in this city that objected to that idea, especially during the pandemic. Can you explain a little bit of the dynamic here? I think you've been on before, and you've made it very clear that none of the council members liked the idea of this, and neither did the mayor. But it was a harsh reality we had to face. That the council, do you get a sense that there is a more quiet majority out there that didn't like it but understood it had to be done? Or, I mean, did most of your constituents not like it, but you're just like, we have to do this. We were elected to look out for the city, and we have to do it, and you'll just deal with the aftermath later?
You know, it was kind of a whole mix of people. We had so many people hitting us from different sides. We had people who were out of work and saying, how can you do this during a pandemic? You had other people going like, this is the most responsible thing you can do. You've got a shortfall in the budget that's coming. It's $330 million. You had the comptroller of the Treasury that had written us a letter and said, you know, he's not kidding. You've got to get your books in order. You've got to balance out. You've got to put some money away for a rainy day fund. Because we really didn't have one. And then you had groups out there sending us messages, particularly, you know, the group that was talking about defunding the police, very strong voice, and they were sending us messages as well. It just depends on, you know, what time of day you were looking at your emails. They were coming in from all kinds of different things. So you had all kinds of mixed messages. In the end, I mean, our responsibility was to balance that budget. That's what the mayor proposed. That's what we had to do. The council took it up a few cents, put some money into schools, some other things. But it was not it was a budget that was basically put together to make sure that the city would hold together, trying to keep the core services in place.
Gotcha. One of the things you said, you know, increased was education. Also, more than $1 million added to the budget for the police department. And I would imagine the chief would say this is money that's needed for paying new recruits, bringing new folks in, and some other items. But, you know, there's that defunding of the police department movement, and it's happening here in Nashville. Any thoughts about that? And maybe you have to wonder, some of the protesters are going to say that and say, wait a second, you're doing the exact opposite of what we wanted.
Well, you know, obviously everybody's tired from last night, and it's been kind of a whirlwind over the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if the city was quite yet ready to. Obviously, we had, you know, a couple of weeks from when that message started. You know, and obviously we've been through a pandemic, and people have been thanking the first responders. All of a sudden, everything changed really, really quick. I'm not sure how fast we were ready to make the change, but I will say, Nick, that I think people were listening. I was listening. A lot of the council members were listening. The mayor was listening. There's a message out there that's being made. And, you know, I always worry that after, you know, they have lots of rallies and other things and protests, you know, it gets warmer or whatever, and then the message kind of dissipates. We were talking about the high school shootings in Parkland in Florida, and the messages those kids made. The people who are making this message, you know, over the last couple of weeks, very strong message. The question is, how do you work together to come up with something that does create change? And I think they're sending a very strong message. It may not be, you know, when we first heard defund the police, like everybody else, everybody goes, yeah, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't take every bit of money that goes to the police department and put it over here. But there are elements to some of this about, like the professor was talking about, mental health components, de-escalation, different parts of it that are a little different than what maybe we've thought about before. And so it was interesting listening to the professor. Those are things that maybe we should talk about. Maybe that makes things better. I'm a big proponent of community policing. Tried to pass a bill a couple of years ago about doing even more. You know, when we work together, when there's much better relationships, when people aren't so intimidated by each other, we can get a lot further. And so it may not have changed in the budget last night, but I think the message is there.
Let's take a phone call or two for you. We've got Wesley. Wesley, good morning. Go ahead, Wesley.
Yes, sir. And I just wanted to call in. I'm really, really disappointed because we have so many people that are out of work. We have widows that are living alone that can't afford what they're paying now. And to put this burden on someone else without even trying to cut anything, it is really a disappointment to even just live in Davidson County where we feel like we have been robbed by these people who are supposed to represent us.
All right. Give you a chance to comment on that. The idea that nothing's been cut, if you want to address that in recent months, recent sessions, and then also the idea of, is there, and I've had several people ask me, does this mean some, like that woman he's describing, who's on a fixed income in a home, are people going to lose their homes because of this if they can't quite meet the property tax that's going up for them?
You know, I certainly hope not, and there's different programs out there to help. I think Wesley's point is very well taken. You know, last couple of shows we've been talking about just the different types of messages that have been being thrown at us from different places. What I would say, Wesley, is, again, we are sort of all in this together. Nobody saw this pandemic coming. The city had some financial issues going in. The last couple of years, spending more than it was actually bringing in. You can't do that. Families can't do that. That doesn't work. We had to get control over that, and I think that's the responsibility. People may get mad at the council and said, well, it's partly your fault. Yeah. If we were spending more than we were bringing in, that's part of our responsibility and part of our fault. Got to get control over it, just like getting control over your own family budget. The problem here was when you were trying to get control over that, you got tornadoes, and then you've got a pandemic that basically closes down the economic opportunities of the city. City's coming back. We're in phase 2. We'll get back to phase 3. I hear that around the state, things are opening back up. The hope is that it even though being safe, that we open up very, very safely but quickly, and the economy comes back, and we can readjust this and try to make sure that it's easier for people. We got our work to do. And just because we passed a budget last night does not mean that this is over. You're looking at what's going on with the state, federal stuff, does the economy come back? But Nick, I will tell you that, you had groups screaming at us at one thing and saying something else over here. This is what I was worried about, and that is folks who are really terrified that this dollar increase is going to hurt them seriously in the pocketbook.
Yeah, and we will see. Now, I would think that the ones that now accept this, and I guess they have no choice, and by the way, when does it take effect?
So when I say that we're still looking at it, I think the tax bills go out sometime in October, so it'll be next year. If something happens between now and October the 5th, when those bills go out, maybe we can do something. So it's not like, we just stop last night and go, and it's also not one of those things, Nick, where everybody's going like, we had to pass a budget. That's a requirement. It has to balance. We're looking at this giant hole in our revenue stream. But you got council members going, we're not finished. We can't stop. We got to keep looking at this and see whether something changes where we can actually start maybe moving back.
You mean actually go back if things get better and lower the tax rate?
Well, so again, you're looking at a situation where projections are $330 million shortfall.
Right. Maybe
that's why that rate was so high.
Okay.
What happens? That's just a guess. what happens if the economy improves? What happens if the federal government gives us money?
Fingers crossed on all that. Well, and beyond all that, as we go to the break, and I'll let you touch on this with some more phone calls when we come back. Cindy and Joe are standing by. But the idea that you've said this and others have, the city was in some tight financial straits even before the tornadoes and then even before the pandemic. And so the thinking is going to be, as we emerge, hopefully eventually from the pandemic, things get rebuilt from the tornado, that we go back and see what the heck we were doing wrong leading up to all that. You know, I can stomach. All right, I understand the pandemics hit us hard and the tornadoes. No one controls Mother Nature. But there's no excuse for the financial straits we were in. And I don't know, it's not under this current mayor, but some of the prior ones didn't do a good, they did a lousy job. And so did the council to some degree, putting us in this hole that made us with no wiggle room when a disaster hit. So that's going to have to be addressed so that doesn't happen again, because there's going to be other tornadoes and there are going to probably be other pandemics. And we need to be in a better financial footing when those things happen. That's just my little soapbox. We'll take a break, let you comment on that, and we'll take phone calls as well. 737-7587 right after this.